what is this standard deviation and what is variance? So let me focus on standard deviation and then we'll go to variance. Now, standard deviation and variance, remember always stress on understanding. Make sure you understand what is happening, all right? Once you understand what is happening, although how they twist, you can answer the question, okay? So the understanding of standard deviation and variation is, standard deviation is a measure of dispersion. Measure of dispersion, all right? Whereas your median, your mode, your median, all right, and your mean is a measure of central tendency. So I told you the other day, the data, your data comes from, your data starts from a small value and it goes in a range of a large value. But although it goes from one extreme to the other extreme, but the data sometimes centers around a certain value. That value could be a median, that value could be a mean, that value could be your, it could also be what I'm trying to say, your mode. Okay, it could also be that. So this is what I was trying to tell you. Whereas standard deviation is more of the measure of dispersion. Measure of dispersion means we are talking about the spread. Okay, we are talking about the spread of the data. That means the data spreads. How much does the data spread? That means if you have, okay, let's say this is a range of value from 0 to 100. Let's say the data you collected is somewhere from 40 to 80. So your data spread is only from 40 to 80. All right. Let's say another student collected and his data is from 20 to 90. So that student's data spreads from 20 to 90. So he has a bigger spread and this student has a smaller spread. That's the meaning of dispersion. That's the meaning of spread of the data. All right. Yes, we understand. But is there a value? Is there a value which we can use, which will indicate to us that this spread is bigger than this spread? All right. So is there a value to indicate that? Now, so here we have taken our value of reference as the mean value. So that means, let's say the mean value is this. This is the mean value for both the spread. And these are all the x values. So I'm going to put it as x1, x2, x3, all right, x4, x5, x6, x7, and x8. That's for the red one. Whereas for the blue one, that's the x1, that's your x2, that's your x3, and your x4. All right, so you can see the reason why your blue one, the dispersion, the spread is small, because most of its values are close to the mean. And you see they're close to the mean. Whereas for the red one, it has a bigger spread because most of its values are further away from the mean. All right. So this measurement of how close all the data, whatever, I only put 4 data, the 4 x values, how close are they to the mean? And here you have 8 data, how close are they to the mean? And that will give us a certain indication of how the data is spread. So the concept is bigger they are, or further away they are from the mean, bigger is the spread. And you see, this is very far away from the mean. This is very far from the mean, therefore the spread is big. This is the smallest value, the biggest value. Both are closer to the mean, therefore this is a smaller spread. Okay, so we are beginning to get the idea. All right, yet we have not found a value. So in statistics, how close all values of the data to the mean, how close all values of the data to the mean is used in measuring what we call the dispersion, the spread of the data, how close it is. That measurement is what we call standard deviation. So that's why the word deviation. Standard deviation means the deviation of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 for this fellow, the deviation of all these values from the mean. For the blue one, the deviation is the deviation of all these values from the mean. Can you follow? That gives you the spread. That is why we call it standard, and we standardize it. We standardize it, so we got it standard deviation. All right, now let us come to the actual formula and calculation. So the overall concept. So standard deviation is actually the deviation of each value from the mean. So for the let's take the blue one easier. The blue one, it will be you take x1, you minus your mean. This mean, so this mean I put it as x bar, they're the same. Okay, and then I square plus x2, I minus the mean, I square. Why I square? This is the way, this is the formula we have created for standard deviation. There are reasons, okay? But here, let me simplify. Let us not go into detail of it, but at least you have understood. So while you taking this minus this, you're taking the x1 value with the mean, you are finding how much x1 is deviated. This is actually the deviation. Deviation of x1 from the mean. It's just that the formula dictates you square it. Deviation of x2 from the mean plus the deviation of x3 from the mean plus deviation of x4 from the mean. All right? And this whole thing divided by how many data? 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 data. All right? And you square root the whole thing. Since you square this, after adding, you square root. That's the formula of standard deviation, the meaning of standard deviation. So the meaning of standard deviation is that. So the meaning is you find it's the deviation of all data, all right? All the values of data you've collected, find out how much are they deviating from the mean, every single data. So for that, you take each data, you minus with the mean. Doesn't matter it's big or small. All right, so if it is smaller than the mean, you'll get a negative value, but you square that, it becomes positive. If the value is bigger, then it will be positive, square remains positive. The thing is, standard deviation, no such thing as negative value. All standard deviations are positive value because you are squaring it. And then after squaring it, the whole thing you square it. That is standard deviation. And you already learned earlier, your variance. Your variance is the square. Your variance is the square of the standard deviation. Your variance is the square of the standard deviation. So in other words, standard deviation is the square root of the variance. Standard deviation is the square root of the variance, or the variance is the square of the standard deviation. And normally we find standard deviation. Once you know standard deviation, you just square, you get your variance. All right, so that's your understanding. So remember this, each of this value represents, okay, each of this value represents deviation. Deviation from the mean. From the mean. Each of that value represents deviation from the mean. All this represents deviation from the mean. So you are finding the deviation from the mean. Okay? All right, that's the idea of standard deviation. So that is why it's called the measure of dispersion. Dispersion means spread. Okay?